A nonpartisan independent agency called the U.S. Institute of Peace that promotes conflict resolution around the world is suing the Trump administration after a sudden takeover by Elon Musk's Doge team. The Institute is not a federal agency. It was created by Congress and is funded by Congress, and it owns and manages its own headquarters. But Doge personnel gained access to the Institute after being turned away once on Monday, then returning with D.C. police officers. It's all part of the effort, the administration claims, to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Author and journalist Michael Lewis, who's written bestsellers like Liar's Poker, Moneyball, and The Big Short, has a new book out profiling people who work in the federal government. He began the book long before President Trump took office. It's very timely. It counters some of the stereotypes we're hearing about federal workers. It's called Who is Government? The Untold Story of Public Service. Michael, every book you write seems to be incredibly impeccably timed. There's no way you could have known about Doge and the what's going on with the efforts of Elon Musk. But you write in the book, you say there's a kind of bigotry about civil servants. And you went on to say there's the stereotype of the government worker. We all have in our heads this intractable picture of the 9-to-5er living off the taxpayer who adds no value and has no energy and somehow still subverts the public will. That's not what you found when you looked into the civil service.
No, in fact, this is why it first struck me as just this huge literary opportunity. Because when I started wandering around the departments no one pays attention to, in the first place it was like commerce and energy and agriculture, I was just shocked. Not just by the caliber of the person, but by the quality of the character. Like people who were extremely mission-driven, very knowledgeable, devoted to public service. Didn't think, what's kind of great about them is they don't think of themselves as characters. They're horrible at telling their story. And then they're also surrounded by a phalanx of, political operatives who don't want them to tell their stories. But it was just like, it was character after character that you could write what felt like, short stories about them. And so it was, there's just a disconnect. I do think it's true that when people throw around insults about the federal bureaucrats, they're really revealing they don't know what goes on in the federal government. It's a mind-bendingly complicated place. It's doing lots of different things, some of them very well and some of them less well. When you go in, one of the things you notice is how hard fraud would be to perpetrate. Waste is different. Waste is a little complicated. And there are all sorts of inefficiencies that are not really the fault of the workers. It's more the fault of the structure of the system. But you can't take a federal worker to lunch and buy them a turkey sandwich. They just won't take the money. They're watched every which way, and they're just conditioned to be very, very careful about what they do financially. Like if you said to me, Michael, you got to go write a story about fraud, I would much rather go look for it in a private company. Much more likely to find it.
You think it's easier to find fraud in a private company than in the civil service?
Oh yeah. I worked on Wall Street, and there are a million things happen every day in a Wall Street firm that if it happened in the civil service, it would be a scandal. The people there permanently are constantly sort of kind of jerry-rigging whatever they're doing in response to, effectively a lack of an under-provision of resources. They're not getting new technology when they should get new technology. It's hard to hire new people. Right now, it's really interesting. It's hard to get young people, and the Doge team, the first thing they did was basically fire all the young people, all the people who'd just been hired.
Probationary employees, who are also employees who have gotten promotions. Yeah. It's not just the newest employees, it's also people who got promotions and they're probationary in their new jobs.
That's right. And it's people, if you think about it, who's hired in the last year? It's either young people or it's people who've been hired very specifically for a job of the moment that needs to be done now. So in some ways, it's maybe some of the more critical people. The bigger point is I don't think anybody in the private sector would walk into a big institution and think that and behave the way Doge is behaving and think that was a smart way to run any institution, like vilifying the employees and making them feel terrified and scorned, not actually bothering to figure out what the enterprise is doing, firing people only to have to rehire them because you realize you made a mistake, insulting them every day. I don't think any corporate CEO would think that was wise. And the only example I can think of it in the private sector is when Elon Musk went into Twitter. And that hasn't worked out so great.
Given the amount of time you kind of spent poking around in the federal bureaucracy and in different departments, Commerce Department and elsewhere, is there any way that Elon Musk and the team from Doge, in the time that they had, could actually root out like and figure out what employees were doing a good job, what employees were doing? I mean, do you think any of these firings is really based on the actions of these employees?
No, I think they're saying they're doing one thing, but they're actually doing another. And there are all kinds of tells. Like when you say you're going in to find fraud, the last thing you do is fire the inspector general of whatever agency there is. They're the cops on the beat who report to Congress. They're the ones who know the most about where fraud might be. They're doing exactly the sort of thing you would do if you were trying to introduce fraud.
You wrote two of the pieces in the book. There's a number of other writers who profiled other public employees, federal workers. You profiled a former coal worker whose work prevented roof falls in coal mines. You also an FDA worker who helped create Cure ID, which is a database that lets doctors report novel uses of existing drugs to treat rare infectious diseases. The people profiled in your book, many of whom have worked for the federal government for a long time and are doing really extraordinary things. Have any of them been fired yet? Do they expect to be?
So 2 have left. There are eight characters or teams that were profiled by me and 6 other writers. 2 have left. The one I know that has just inexplicable damage done to the operation was there's a group inside the IRS that pursues cybercrime, and they return, thousands of dollars for every dollar you spend on them. They've brought in billions of dollars from finding stashes of Bitcoin in the possession of criminals. They've broken up child sex trafficking rings. And that group has been gutted. The actual character in the book is still in the job, but his unit has been gutted. And it's just like, why? It's a profit center.
Why would you go after and fire people who are actually bringing in money to the federal government?
Well, the IRS, I think it's true that like every dollar you spend, you get $10 back. And they're clearly very hostile towards the IRS.
Yeah. Michael, I wanted to ask you, and I hope it's okay. In 2021, you suffered a terrible loss. Your daughter Dixie was killed in a car crash. How has grief been for you and for your wife, Tabitha?
You and I share this now as a subject. We're in a, we're in a club that nobody wants to belong to, right? It's affected me in a lot of ways. I mean, not all negatively. That it has made me far more sort of attuned to what other people might be going through. You never know what's happened to someone. I feel like I've been given a kind of a hall pass into the kingdom of grief, and I can wander around it. I miss Dixie. I miss her every day. I think about her every day, I write. I try to create things that give people pleasure first, and I'm going to try to do something about her soon. I think I've kind of started to process it to the point I can put some words to it that might be useful.
Well, Michael, thank you for talking to us. I really appreciate it. The new book is Who is Government? The Untold Story of Public Service. Thanks so much for your time.